The rain hit the pavement like 1,000 tiny fists, each drop a reminder of how cold the world could be. Marcus stood under the flickering streetlight outside the convenience store, watching a woman collapse to her knees on the sidewalk across the street. Her shopping bag scattered, cans rolling into the gutter, and not a single person stopped. They walked around her like she was just another obstacle. Umbrellas tilted forward, faces buried in phones, something twisted in his chest, sharp and accusatory. When had they all become so blind? He'd been that way once, too. 6 months ago, Marcus wouldn't have noticed her either. He'd been too busy climbing the corporate ladder at his tech firm, too focused on the next promotion, the next bonus, the next achievement that would finally make him feel like he'd made it. His ex-wife Sarah used to say he'd forgotten how to see people. She'd pack her bags on a Tuesday morning and leave, him in their pristine downtown, loft with nothing but silence and the echo of her words. "You've become someone I don't recognize." Now, watching this stranger struggle to gather her groceries in the rain, her thin jacket soaked through, Marcus felt something crack open inside him. He crossed the street without thinking, his dress shoes splashing through puddles. "Let me help you," he said, crouching down beside her. She looked up, and he saw she couldn't have been more than 25. Her eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted in a way that went deeper than missing sleep, the kind of tired that came from carrying too much for too long. "I got it," she said automatically. But her hands were shaking as she reached for a can of soup that had rolled under a parked car. Marcus retrieved it anyway. "I'm sure you do. But maybe just this once you don't have to." They gathered her groceries in silence, and he noticed how carefully she'd shopped. Generic brands, the cheapest options, nothing extra. When he picked up a small teddy bear that had fallen from one of the bags, she grabbed it quickly, almost protectively. "It's for my daughter," she said, as if she needed to explain. "Her birthday's tomorrow." "She'll be 4. "That's a great age," Marcus said, though he had no real knowledge of children. "I bet she'll love it." The woman she finally introduced herself as Elena accepted. His offer to drive her home only after he'd stood in the rain long enough to prove he wasn't going anywhere. Her apartment was in a neighborhood Marcus usually drove through without really seeing, the kind of place where paint peeled from window frames and front. Doors had 3 different locks. She lived on the 3rd floor of a building, where the elevator had an out-of-order sign that looked permanent. As they climbed the stairs, Marcus carrying most of her bags, Elena explained in fragmented sentences. Single mom, working 2 jobs, daycare costs, medical bills from when her daughter had pneumonia last winter. The teddy bear was the only birthday present she could afford. Inside her apartment, a babysitter, a neighbor who Elena clearly couldn't actually afford, sat with a small girl who had Elena's eyes and a smile that could light up the darkest room. The daughter, Sophia, ran to her mother, and Marcus saw Elena transform. All the exhaustion fell away for just a moment, replaced by pure love. He left quickly, not wanting to intrude. But Elena's thank you followed him down the stairs. It should have been the end of the story. A good deed done, conscience cleared, back to his regular life. But Marcus couldn't stop thinking about them. About Sophia's birthday. About Elena's shaking hands and careful grocery shopping. The next morning, Marcus did something he hadn't done in years. He called in sick to work. He spent the day shopping, not for himself, but for a little girl he'd met for 30 seconds. A proper birthday gift, some groceries, clothes that looked about the right size. He felt foolish carrying it all back up those 3 flights of stairs, worried Elena would think he was some kind of creep or worse, feel like charity case. But when she opened the door and saw him, standing there with bags and a wrapped present, she didn't look offended. She looked like she might cry. "You didn't have to," she started. "I know," Marcus said, "but I wanted to. Is that okay?" Sophia's birthday party was the smallest Marcus had ever seen. Just Elena, the neighbor babysitter, and him. But it was also the most joyful. They ate grocery store cake, and Sophia squealed over the educational toy set Marcus had bought. And for a few hours, Marcus forgot about promotions and quarterly, earnings and all the things that used to seem so important. Over the following weeks, Marcus found himself returning to that 3rd-floor apartment. At first, he told himself he was just checking in, making sure they were okay. But the truth was more complicated. Elena and Sophia had awakened something in him that had been dormant for years, a sense of purpose that didn't come from a job title or a bank balance. Elena never asked for help, but Marcus learned to see the needs anyway. A leaking faucet he could fix. A ride to Sophia's doctor's appointment when Elena's car broke down. Hours spent watching Sophia so Elena could sleep before her night shift. Small things that meant everything. "Why are you doing this?" Elena asked him one evening after Sophia had gone to bed. They sat in her tiny kitchen, drinking coffee that was probably cheaper than anything Marcus usually bought, but somehow tasted better. Marcus thought about the question, about Sarah's words, about the man he'd become, so focused on his own success that he'd lost sight of what actually mattered. "Because someone needed to," he said finally. "And because maybe I needed to as well. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be part of something real." 3 months later, Marcus's boss called him into the office. The promotion he'd been working toward for years was finally on the table. Senior vice president, corner office, 6-figure raise. Everything he'd once dreamed about. "There's just one thing," his boss said. "The position requires relocation. Seattle office. You'd need to leave within the month." 6 months ago, Marcus would have said yes without hesitation. But now he thought about Tuesday evenings reading to Sophia, about helping Elena study for her GED classes, watching her face light up when she understood a difficult concept, about the community he'd discovered in that neighborhood he used to drive through without seeing, the neighbors who looked out for each other, the small bodega owner who always slipped extra into Elena's grocery bags, the retired teacher who tutored kids for free in her living room. He thought about all the things he'd learned about what it meant to truly live, about how the best moments weren't earned or achieved, they were shared, how real wealth wasn't measured in dollars but in the way. Sophia ran to hug him when he visited. In Elena's growing confidence as she pursued her education, in the feeling of being needed for who he was, not what he could produce. "I need to think about it," Marcus told his boss. Words that would have been unthinkable before. That evening he sat with Elena on her worn couch while Sophia practiced writing her name at the kitchen table. He told her about the offer. "You should take it," Elena said immediately. "Marcus, this is your career. This is what you've worked for." "Is it?" he asked. "Because I'm not sure anymore. I think maybe I've been working toward the wrong things." Elena shook her head. "You can't give up your dreams for us." "That's the thing," Marcus said. "I don't think I'm giving up dreams. I think I'm finally waking up to what actually matters. You and Sophia didn't need me to be successful. You just needed me to show up. And that's taught me more than any promotion ever could." The decision crystallized in that moment. He didn't need to move to Seattle to prove his worth. His worth wasn't tied to a job title. It was tied to the connections he'd built, the lives he'd touched, the person he'd become when he finally opened his eyes and started seeing people again. Marcus declined the promotion. He took a lateral position at a local nonprofit instead, helping connect resources to families like Elena's. The pay cut was significant, but for the first time in his life, Marcus felt rich. A year later, Elena graduated with her GED and enrolled in community college. Sophia started kindergarten, confident and bright, and Marcus stood with them at Elena's graduation, part of a family he'd never expected but couldn't imagine living without. Sarah had been right. He had become someone unrecognizable, but not in the way she'd meant. He'd become someone better, someone who understood that the truest measure of a life well lived wasn't what you accumulated, but what you gave away, not what you achieved alone, but who you became when you reached out your hand to help someone else stand. And it all started with her, a stranger, on a rainy sidewalk who taught him the most important lesson of all, that we save ourselves by saving each other, and that the smallest act of kindness can transform not just one life, but every life it touches.